as I was listening to Senator Rohrt and Senator Kaminsky, I was also trying to read. On a rules agenda with a combined at least 140 bills, even the most studious amongst us has to pick and choose what you're going to spend time reading or preparing for. And this bill happened to pique my interest. And all the things going on and a variety of different bills that will come before us tonight, appointments tomorrow, more big pieces of legislation tomorrow, I think I found myself in a position like a lot of people, including the members in this House, and I'm sure in the Assembly. I have a copy of an article that appeared today. I have to flip it over to get to all the parts that are in here, but it appeared today in the New York Times. And not that the fact that it's the New York Times, but the fact that I would have to rely on a media account to get some discernible information about a piece of legislation of this magnitude that is being described as, let me quote, the most aggressive climate change program in the United States of America, period. That's a quote by Governor Cuomo. By the way, Senator Kaminsky, very nice picture of you in the New York Times. I did see that as part of the article. But I also read in here some facts that I think are daunting, to say the least. And part of it says, to dovetail on what Senator Rohrt said, the challenge of reaching such goals are daunting. New York has so far only managed to reduce its emissions 8% between 1990 and 2015, according to the most recent state inventory. Gavin Donahue from the Independent Power Producers said New York is going to pay a lot for their electricity because of this bill. There's no doubt about that. So I thought, let me take, you know what, if I can't get to every component of the bill, let me at least start by reading the memo, which has general sections that are really applicable to all pieces of legislation: title of the bill, purpose of the bill, summary of the provisions, justification, and the effective date. I've been here a while, so when I hear that this is one of the most epic pieces of legislation that we're going to consider, I couldn't believe that I was looking at a memo that only slipped onto the back part of the first page because it mentioned the effective date. The justification is barely one paragraph. I repeat, barely one paragraph. And of course, it blames the federal government, among other things. And I look at this and I think, we are putting ourselves in a very precarious position, in my opinion. And I'm very nervous about where we're going, particularly in light of a number of other pieces of legislation that have been considered and are being considered right now. In our conference, which just took place before we got out here, we tried in earnest to have a real discussion about what's contained in this legislation. And I'm a realist. I understand that sometimes things happen at the end, and they happen for a variety of reasons. But today is June 18th, and just to make sure I wasn't wrong, I looked at the bill, and the date on the bill is June 18th. So this bill was introduced today, and for some unknown reason, we have to have a message of necessity to pass this bill today, not tomorrow, not even the next day, but it's got to be done today. I don't think that's really working the way it should, because there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I see here some of the comments that say New York gets about 60% of its electricity from carbon-free sources, most of it from hydroelectric dams and nuclear power plants. There's been a whole variety of things that have occurred under the Cuomo administration in terms of energy policy, and many of them just have flat out not worked, period. So here we're talking about, reducing our carbon footprint. going to zero emissions, going to 30%, going to 50%, doing it by a date certain, getting to 85%, and then getting to 100%. The governor, some will laud him and give him credit for forcing the closure of a nuclear power plant that was carbon-free, zero emissions, and provided 2,200 megawatts of power with no alternative. None. Senator Rohr referred to the hardworking families. And people are talking about workers and they're talking about protecting them and how they're on the front lines. And this bill, actually, one of the few specific things in here is that there's going to be prevailing wage. That, in and of itself, can engender hours-long debate. But I'm a little concerned that prevailing wage may become a moot point because you really can't have prevailing wage if you don't have a job. And if we don't have jobs in this sector of our economy, how are we going to deal with these issues? The real point that I want to focus on is this council or this committee. Now, I want to be clear, too. I don't doubt for 1 second the sponsor's intentions. Not at all. And there's a whole litany of sponsors in both houses on this legislation. But I chafe at the notion that we're going to appoint a council with 22 members, and yes, it has some legislative representatives. But they're getting all the power. Here we have had long debates about the equivalency and the prerogative and the stature of the legislative branch of government. And now we're giving it away. We're giving it away to unelected bureaucrats. And I'll repeat that, unelected bureaucrats. I don't care how talented they are, what kind of experience they have. They don't run for office the way we do. They don't have to be directly responsible to the public the way we do. They don't have to go back home to a chamber of commerce or a not-for-profit or a small business owner and say, yeah, you know, God, I'm sorry that the DEC has said you can't have that kind of furnace anymore, that you can't use oil, that you have to use wind power or solar power, and if it costs 4 or 5 times more, you just got to suck it up. I think it's wrong to do something of this magnitude in such a short period of time, particularly when we're giving away our jurisdiction and our sovereignty as a legislative branch of government to these folks who are going to be making these decisions. And it says they shall do this, that they have to promulgate regulations that force the recommendations of this unelected committee of state bureaucrats. I don't want to go home and talk to my constituents about this and say, this is the Climate Protection Act. I forget the exact verbiage. But I'd rather go home and say, the legislature said, you know what? If you're going to invest in solar, because we believe in that, you're going to get a $2,500 tax credit. If you're going to hire people and you're using green energy, or you have a LEED certified building, you're going to get a $1,500 credit per employee that you hire. I don't see that. And there's some very talented people right in this room who have a lot of good ideas. At 11 o'clock at night, in the zeal and the desire to bring something forward, I think we're shortchanging this House, this legislature, this government, and most importantly, the people that we represent. Now, I happened to ask one of our staff, I need to see the bill. Is it a long bill? I said, yes. It's about 20 pages. To me, 20 pages is really not a long bill, considering what we see here in this House. Now, don't get me wrong. I don't want to have a bill that's 700 pages for us to consider on a moment's notice. But again, I think one of the reasons this bill is relatively short is because they're saying all these people, they're all going to get appointed, they have this responsibility, then they tell somebody else what to do, and they'll do it, and the world will be fine. I think we owe our constituents better. And God knows, I know there are going to be memos and support. And there are going to be people saying, oh, this is it. We've made it. I can't in good conscience go back to the people I represent and say that this is going to be in their best interest. I don't want to have to go back to a homeowner, not even a business owner, and say, yeah, this is not, it's not going to work out the way you wanted. We had hoped, you know, we were trying to get that 100% emissions reduction or 85%, but since we only got 8% between 1990 and 2015, you know, maybe we'll reach 24, 26% by 2050. Aspirational, yes. Realistic, no. And I think the legislature should take a much more prominent role in enacting specific legislation as opposed to delegating our authority and letting other people make those decisions. Again, well-intentioned by the sponsor, I respect that, but I know that we can do better.